Good evening, everyone. Shavua Tov and welcome. So lovely to see you all. I hope everyone had a good Shabbos and a guten Woch to all of you. A big welcome to the approximately 300 people who've joined us already on Zoom. Great to see you all. I hope you had a good Shabbat. Let us know who you are and where you are. Please, at the bottom, you'll see there's a chat button. We'd love to actually see who you are. So tell us where you tuned in from, and let's have a chat until we begin at 7:30. So we'll begin promptly at 7:30. Our first guest up tonight is, of course, Rory Steyn, who was Nelson Mandela's bodyguard for many, many years and someone very close to the president. And after that, at 8 o'clock, we'll be joined by Judge Albie Sachs and Luanda Qazo. I must get my clicks right long before then. And they're going to be talking about the South African Constitution, the Constitutional Court, and Albie is going to tell some remarkable stories about his life. So we're very excited. We've got an unbelievable lineup tonight. Welcome to Brooks Spector. I see you've joined us from Parkhurst. Lovely to see you, Brooks. Haven't seen you in person in a while. And Benji, hello and welcome.
Howie, good Woch. I hope everyone had a good Shabbos. And Howie, I was thanking you a little bit earlier for that delicious gift you gave me.
Of course, it was a gift of tequila, and of course, in order to be legally compliant, I would have had to have done that before Sunday midnight.
Exactly. I didn't want to disclose what exactly the gift was because I didn't want the security police, arriving at your door. But
so luckily, I got it. I sneaked it in just before the new lockdown regulations came into effect. So at least you had something to toast in Spanish and Mexican during Shabbos this week.
Exactly. Howie, I'm super excited about the guest. I think it's a great way to remember this unbelievable man, that did so much for all of us.
So it, of course, was Mandela Day, but it was Shabbos as well. I presume that meant it was very difficult for you to do anything for Mandela Day today, Benj?
Where at our work we did a whole Mandela Day where the guys drove it, and it was a bit difficult today because of Shabbos. We were part of a sponsorship or part of a team that was involved in a special ride today. Obviously, I couldn't do it, but I know we took a bit of time today to reflect on him, and we had this incredible story when Yoni, I know Yoni, he was in hospital when he was little. He had like gastro or something small in the Linksfield, and it was the exact same time as Mandela was looking after his son. I don't know if you remember when his son was in the Linksfield, and he started coming very late at night because it was just too chaotic when he came early on. This is like about 15 years ago, and the one night Amanda bumped into him, and he ended off, to cut a long story short, he ended off the conversation with Amanda saying, "I'll pray for your son, you pray for mine," and having had Yoni on his lap for a little bit. So, we were kind of remembering some of that and just how blessed we are to have a man like that as one of our leaders.
Fantastic, and a big welcome to Rory Steyn. Welcome, Rory. There are about 400,
hello, gentlemen.
There are about 400 people watching us already, and we're about 10 minutes before go live. So we're going to have an informal chat to you. We asked a few people where they are in the world. And we've got some people who've logged in from Cape Town. We've got people from Tel Aviv. We've got more people from Durban, Cape Town, Johannesburg. Some people in Bantry Bay, I see. Lots of people. We get a lot of Canadians who join us. Many Australians. We've got one or two people in New Zealand who are watching us this evening. We've got some followers in Pakistan. We have Costa Rica. Excellent. We have France. So all over the world. And I see we've got people who've logged in from Nigeria as well. So welcome to you all, and Rory, a big welcome. And before we even start chatting informally, I want to share my screen and ask you
Rory.
about this photograph.
Yeah, it's a great photograph, man.
It's quite it's a bit of a lie because we didn't look that fresh. We didn't feel that fresh, hey Rory?
No, well, not at the end. How could we ever feel fresh after 11 hours? Plus.
Exactly.
But let me just tell you, Howard, let me tell you a bit about that photo because Benji won't. So the guy on the right of that photo there is a runner by the name of Johnny somebody or other. But Demas, that's it, Benji.
Yeah.
He's but as you can see there, he's a green number. So I think Johnny had run probably as many as 16 comrades by then. And his pilot, the guy that had run most of those comrades with him and certainly was doing all of his training for Rocky Roadrunners in Bedford View, sadly passed away about 2 months before comrades. So the club said, well, guys, we have to get Johnny through comrades. You know, is there anybody that would be willing to become his new pilot? And of course, this youngster by the name of Benji Porter puts his hand up. And the lady that's standing between Benji and me is a very dear friend of mine by the name of Tony Hesp. She was my physio. So when I did my my ACL in 1988 playing rugby, she was the physio that happened to rehab me purely coincidentally, and we became firm friends. And I said to her, Tony, if you sort this knee out so that I can play rugby again, then I will make a deal with you that when I'm done with my rugby, I will run comrades with you. And I did. Unbeknownst to me, so I think that I'm going to show up there and I'm going to run with Tony, my physio and my friend. But meantime, she has decided, look, I've got to keep an eye on this Benji guy because he's a novice. I don't know how he's going to get a green number, an experienced comrades runner through a comrade. So Tony behaved a bit like a mother hen and kind of shepherded us all. There were some other novices there. Rollo as well was there, wasn't he, Benji?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget what Tony said. I don't know whether you can remember, Benj, but she called the three of us as we came into that stadium there, exhausted as we were. And she said, Benji and Rollo and Rory, now listen to me. You are about to have your first ever comrades finish, and you only ever have one first comrades finish. So I want you to do something. When you run in here, I want you to look around you and absorb this atmosphere. It's very unique, it's very special, and there's only going to be one first one, and enjoy it. And you know, I've run 12, and every 11, all the 11 after that first one, I remember Tony's words. I still practice them, and I tell them to anybody around me, especially novices. So I'll never forget that day.
Exactly.
Sorry for taking time.
No,
but
I want
Rory,
to tell you.
Just to explain to us what is the green number and why did this gentleman need a pilot?
He's blind. Sorry, Howard.
Okay.
Johnny Demas,
an important part of the story.
And I should have said it. That's on me. I should have mentioned that Johnny was blind. But to get a green number, there's 3 ways you can get a green number. You can win 3 comrades, you can get 5 gold medals, or you can run or finish 10 comrades. So Bruce Fordyce says, well, he's the only oak who's done that all 3 ways. No, he's not the only one, but because there are others. But we ran, if you run 10 comrades, finish 10 comrades, they give you that number permanently. And it's very special. They make quite a big deal of it when you cross the finish line. It's one of the great traditions of the greatest foot race in the world.
It was quite funny because Johnny, like we said to Johnny that we're running with this guy and he's the
That's right.
he looked after, he was Nelson Mandela's bodyguard, but Johnny kind of in the mess and the rush understood that Rory was Nelson Mandela's prison warden. And then for the first...
So he didn't like me.
For the first 20K, he never said a word. Now, I knew Johnny, and I thought maybe we were sad about Roy, and it was a tragic year, 2000. It actually was, I had run, and it was a tragic year, and Rory came... I'll tell you, Rory came like a shining light, where he came at a time, there was a tragic motor car accident that a number of runners had died. This guy, Roy Crowitz, who was like a father figure to all of us in a way, had passed away. And Rory came and he was like a breath of fresh air. And he was just wonderful. He ran like advance guard ahead of us, like clearing the way, through thousands of runners. And it was great. But after about 20 Ks, I said to Johnny, oh, you're right. He said, how can we run with this guy? He imprisoned Nelson Mandela. And I was like, Johnny, but you've got the wrong story. This oak looked after Nelson Mandela. And after that, they were wonderful friends. But it took a bit of time to realize that Johnny was sulking about Nelson Mandela. Tony will remember that story. And Tony Hess was actually Rory, she was on. We had a panel with Tim Noakes and Wade van Niekerk, and Tony gave an insert. And Tony's one of the true legends of the running community, and just an incredible person. So that's how Rory and I know each other, and we see each other at events. He looks progressively good looking as I get progressively balder.
Benji, stop it now, man.
Rory, you used to be the most famous Stain, but your son Kyle may be more famous than you now.
Yeah, I think that's already happened. But you must not forget that there are a few other famous Stains like Dale and Mornay.
but are they related to you?
No. Dale will tell you that I am his younger brother, but we aren't actually related. No.
So tell us about your son Kyle.
So my wife Jill was born in Scotland. So she came to South Africa as a very little girl of 18 months old when her dad, who was an engineer, immigrated in the 60s, when South Africa was, needing a lot of professional skills. So he came from Scotland with these two little girls, and they had another two here. So my wife is one of four girls. So because of the fact that she was born there, all three of our boys have got British passports. And through a completely random, again, coincidental conversation between somebody from Scottish rugby and one of the varsity sports, varsity cup rugby commentators said, well, listen, do you know that there's a kid called Kyle Stain playing rugby for Griquas in the Currie Cup who actually qualifies for Scotland? And the guy said, what? Tell me more. And the next thing, the phone rang. We were on holiday in St. Francis. And the voice said, look, so-and-so from Scottish rugby. We understand that you have Scottish heritage through your mother. Do you have a British passport? And the next thing, he was on a plane. He flew out there. He did a training camp with Scotland Sevens, and they took him to Vancouver and Las Vegas. And he played in the Sevens there. And then after his contract expired at Griquas at the end of 2018, he went to Glasgow, and he's there still. He's playing for Glasgow Warriors, and he made his debut against France in the last game that Scotland played in the Six Nations before they were locked down.
Wow, that's amazing. Were you at the game?
Incredible. Yes, I was at the game. Yeah. Let me tell you about that, Howard. So I literally jumped on a plane. I flew via Dubai on Emirates and landed in Glasgow at about 11:30 in the morning for a 3 p.m. kickoff. And I went straight to Kyle's flat, and his wife Ellie and I dumped the bag there, jumped on a train, and shot through to Edinburgh. And it was National Women's Day in the UK on that day that Scotland played France. So Scotland have this wonderful tradition when they play at home, in that they have a full massed pipe band on the field at Murrayfield, but they have a lone piper standing on the roof of the grandstand. And that lone piper plays the first few bars of Flower of Scotland, and then the whole massed pipe band pick it up. And that day, because it was National Women's Day, the lone piper on the roof there was a lady, which I thought was pretty special, And then they play the first verse, accompanied by the massed pipe band, and the whole stadium sings it. And then there's just dead silence for the second verse. As the first verse ends, all the music stops. And that crowd of 65,000 Scots sing the second verse of Flower of Scotland a cappella. And even now, I'm getting the hair on my arm standing up. It's just beautiful. Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, that's an amazing story. You must be very, very proud. You've got two sons, is that correct?
Three. We have three. Yeah. Carl's the eldest of the three boys. Yeah.
And the other two still in South Africa?
Yes. Ian's about to hopefully graduate with a BCom from Tux at the end of the year, and our Latlamiki Craig is in grade 11.
Fantastic. So how is homeschooling going?
Amazingly well, actually. I have to. I've already. Maybe I didn't tell you, but my wife Jill is a school teacher. In fact, she's a bit more than that. She's actually a headmistress of a prep school, and I can't speak highly enough of those people, of teachers. We all have said on occasion that teachers, cops, and nurses should be paid far more than they are, because they are the salt of the earth, and they are kind of like the core of a community. But the way that they rolled out possibly a year or two of forward planning in terms of online education. They basically rolled that out over the Easter holiday as we were locked down. So when the schools went back after Easter, they were ready, those teachers, and they worked. I hardly saw my wife during the Easter holidays because they were testing and they were trialing and they were getting everything ready so that when school opened, they could teach, from not from a classroom. So incredible. So it's gone actually amazingly well. I know that can't be said for everywhere in South Africa. Certain schools and certain areas and districts and towns and cities don't have the resources that we have in a Joburg or a Cape Town. But just hats off to the teachers. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, the time is in fact 7:31. Good evening. Welcome everyone on behalf of the South African Jewish Report. A huge welcome to all of you. Lovely to see you online. Hope you all had a very good Shabbos. Luando, welcome as well. We're going to be with you shortly. We're just welcoming everyone. I see we've got about 900 people who've logged into Zoom and a lot more on YouTube as well. So a big welcome to you all. Please let us know where you are. And let us have a good evening of conversation and some deep and meaningful conversations today. So on behalf of the South African Jewish Report, a big welcome to you all. In the chat section, please tell us where in the world you are. Welcome to the people from New York and Bloemfontein. And I see we have some people from Sydney, some people tuned in from Eilat, Muli Point, Cape Town, Boca Raton in Florida, people in Nigeria, lots of people in Cape Town. So a big welcome to you all. We've got such an amazing, exciting evening planned for all of you. So Benji, first of all, a big thank you to you for arranging Rory to come tell us some stories about his life and his relationship with Madiba. And Dan Stillerman, if you can turn on your camera, a big welcome to you as well. And thank you once again for tweaking all the buttons and making sure that we broadcast live intensely and efficiently this evening. How's your Shabbos, Dan?
Thank you, Howie. Yeah, Shabbos was good and relaxing. And I actually said to you about half an hour ago that there's actually not that many things to tweak behind the scenes, which I'm quite chuffed about because it means I will be able to listen intently to all the fascinating stories and history. So I'm looking forward to that. And I also have my Shure buff over here.
And tonight, I'm sure you're using your Shure mic.
Sure.
Fantastic. So just to remind everyone, you have two buttons at the bottom of your screen, and let's explain what those buttons do. If you click on the chat button, you will notice that you will be able to chat with everyone and everyone will be able to see what you're saying. So, for example, Shelley just told us she's watching from Israel. Iva is in Milnerton. We have Martin in Edenvale, Edgemead in Cape Town from Leonard. We have Melanie in Durban. So everyone is busy watching that. If you have any questions for either Rory or Luando or Albie, then you should be using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen as well. So anything that goes into the Q&A section, we'll be monitoring. Dan will be monitoring both there as well as on YouTube. So if you have any questions for anyone tonight, please use the Q&A button. So just before we begin, we want to thank Mantis. Mantis are one of our sponsors this evening. They've sponsored a huge number of these webinars. And so just a huge thank you to Mantis for everything that you do, for all the support. And before we begin, let us hear from Mantis. Dan, won't you show their video, please?
Here they are, Mantis.
So thank you so much to Mantis for their support. And Rory, welcome. Lovely to have you with us this evening. You and Benji go back a long way. How many miles do you think the two of you have run together?
Well, thanks, first of all, Howard, for the invitation, for the welcome. Shalom to you all, wherever you may find yourselves. And I'd like to greet you in the name of our beloved president. It's a special day today. I would also like to say, Howard, thanks to Mantis, I'm in the private security industry myself. It's so nice to see colleagues and friends actually, getting involved and supporting community projects. So your question was, how many miles have Benji and I run together? That's a very good one. I would reckon, Benj, we're somewhere between 200 and 400, maybe 500 Ks together, boy.
Yeah, so I think for the 2000 year we trained, which was a unique year. And as I said earlier, and there we trained hundreds of kilometers. And then since then, we kind of took a little bit of an Ironman path. And Rory became a super runner that we couldn't keep up with him. So
no.
So Rory, you are most famous as Nelson Mandela's bodyguard. How on earth did that happen?
Howard, so thanks for the question. And I always like to say what I'm going to say, and that is that it really wasn't all about me. I was one team leader in 4 teams. So we had 2 teams down in Cape Town for when Parliament was in session, and we had 2 teams up here in Gauteng because Madiba had a home in Joburg and his office was at the Union Building. So I was one of the 2 team leaders up here. And I had a lot of men and women, and I do stress the fact that we had some really good women on our teams. So it wasn't all about me. I was part of a large collective, and it was the best 5 years of my life, and I was tremendously privileged. I wish to emphasize, I do get how privileged I was to have served Madiba for those 5 extraordinary years that he was our president.
Rory, I know
how did it happen? Sorry, Howard, you did ask the question. How did it happen? So very simply, and it's I neglected actually to greet Rwando and Justice Albie Sachs as well as my fellow panelists. And it's interesting that Albie, what happened to Albie, and he'll tell us in his own words, was at the hands of the unit that I served in at the time that Madiba became president. So I was a member of the special branch or the security branch. Yes, the dreaded John Vorster security branch. And when FW made that historic announcement on the 2nd of February 1990 that he would release Mr. Mandela and unban all the banned organizations, at the stroke of the pen, as he signed that into law, the security branch had no more work, because our work was all centered around illegal persons and illegal organizations. And all of a sudden, as I say, at the stroke of a pen, they were legal. So my commanders didn't know what to do with me. I was a very young and very wet behind the ears, naive young lieutenant. And they said, what are we going to do with this guy? So somebody said, well, let him start up a VIP protection unit. So that's 1990. Fast forward the movie now to 1994. I've had 4 years to establish a unit. When I look back on it now, I can kind of almost see a divine path through this whole 4 years, because somewhere along those 4 years, I inherited a multiracial unit, which meant that when I went to serve Madiba, and I'm going to tell you how that happened, we had to integrate with the ANC bodyguards and protection and intelligence personnel that were our sworn enemies up until kind of like the week before, that Madiba became president. So what I'm saying to you is that because they made me start this unit way back in 1990, when Madiba became president, he had both a home and an office because of the ANC headquarters that were in what was Shell House, now Luthuli House, were in my town. So as the commander of the police VIP protection unit in Johannesburg, I found myself spending 3/4 of my working day going and doing what we call in the trade advanced security. So we would go in advance to each venue that the president would appear at, and we would make sure that it was secure. So when he becomes president on the 10th of May, 1994, I get this telex, not even a fax, guys. not forget about email. Those were the years of telexes. I get this telex at my office in John Vorster Square that says to me that the newly inaugurated president of the Republic of South Africa will fly by helicopter from the Union Buildings, where he will swear the oath of office before the Chief Justice, who at the time was Arthur Chaskalson. I'm sure you all know that. And he'll fly to Ellis Park, the famous Ellis Park Stadium, where almost a year to the day later, he would famously hand Francois Pienaar the Webb Ellis Trophy to attend a soccer match. Now, who does that? Think about that. Who goes and attends a soccer match literally half an hour after he's become the first democratic president of any country? Well, Madiba did that. And the reason for that was that somebody very astute on the organizing committee of Madiba's inauguration decided that if we put 60,000 soccer fans into Ellis Park, beam the proceedings from the Union Buildings where he swears the oath of office before Justice Chaskalson on the big screens in the stadium, well, then that's 60,000 fewer people clogging up the M1 going north from Joburg to Pretoria, where me and my team of VIP protection cops have got to move 184 VIPs, and I mean serious VIPs. I'm talking heads of state, I'm talking heads of government, I'm talking royalty. Forget about celebrities. They didn't even classify as a big shot VIP in those 184. So our job as my VIP unit in Joburg, with my colleagues from Pretoria and Cape Town and other places that were trained in VIP protection, we had to move those motorcades from Joburg to Pretoria because all the 5-star hotels, Howard, were in Joburg. Now, this is how it works. Even among presidents, you've got an order of precedence. So like George Orwell wrote, not all presidents are equal. There is a pecking order. How is the pecking order determined? Well, by those who have been in office the longest. Guess who they are? All the dictators. So at the top of that order of precedence, you had Gaddafi, you had Arafat, you had Fidel Castro, you had Mugabe, and the guy from Togo, whose name I can't remember, and a few of these other African dictators. They all had to arrive last. Of those 184 VIPs, they had to arrive last. Now, you try going up to a dictator as a cop that has to move him now these 60 Ks north from Joburg to Pretoria to tell him, sir, we need to leave now. Good luck with that. But somehow we got them all into their motorcades and we got them moving north up the M1. And they arrived and they were announced as they walked into the amphitheater to attend this most historic occasion. We got them there. I had very little time. I had maybe 45 minutes to put my feet up. I remember going to the Balalaika Hotel in Sandton, grab a cup of coffee, go into the security control room there, put my feet up and watch the proceedings. I remember seeing the helicopters fly over that huge crowd on the grass there, with, trailing our new national flag. And but I knew that I very soon had to go to Ellis Park and do what I've just told you. That means we take the bomb disposal sniffer dogs through the president's suite at the stadium. We make sure that it's okay. And I'm standing there outside the doors of this president's suite with these Football Association officials from SAFA awaiting the motorcade from the helipad to bring Madiba to the game. He's got to greet the teams and they're waiting on the field of play. He should have been there before kickoff, but things were running a bit late in Pretoria, and that wasn't his fault because Madiba was never late. So the two teams are now waiting at halftime. And here comes the motorcade. It pulls up outside Ellis Park's president's suite. And instead of going into the doors of the suite, the Football Association officials take Madiba to the lift over here on the left. And they go down to the dressing room level. And Madiba walks out onto the field of play in front of these 60,000 celebrating football fans that have just watched him on those big screens become our first president. I mean, it was an absolute celebration, just like the one that's going on the lawns of the Union Buildings. Madiba greets the two teams. He goes back up the tunnel. He comes back up the lift and immediately apologizes to the SAFA officials. He says, gentlemen, please excuse me. I've got to get back to Pretoria. I've got to host 184 of the world's big shot VIPs for lunch. The Palace of Sun City had put a massive marquee on the lawns of the presidential guest house, and this is where this lunch was going to happen. So his protection team get him into the vehicle, and I take a step back, literally and figuratively breathing a sigh of relief that we'd got him off the field safely. I'd never worked in a soccer stadium before. I'd never worked with President Mandela before. I was asking myself, have we done enough? Have we got enough security precautions in place here? And as I say, figuratively breathe this sigh of relief, take a step back, and nothing happens. The motorcade doesn't move. So the protection team leader standing outside the car calls the bodyguard in the vehicle. Remember, these are all ANC guys at this stage. And he says to him, what's going on? And we see the old man trying to get the door of this car open, which might sound simple to you, but it's a 3.8-ton armored BMW. You don't just flick an elbow and the door opens. You need the team leader to give it a good sharp tug, which he does. And he leans in, and his body language is saying, and he says to him, Dada, why do you want to get out? He doesn't quite add, you've just got in, but that's the implication of his body language. The president says nothing to him. He gets out the way. President climbs back out of the car that he's just got into, and he walks around the bonnet, and he starts heading guys to the back of this reception hall with its beautiful polished wooden floor, to the vehicle ramp where they should be driving out to go to the helipad. The SAJR officials have long since gone in to watch the second half. There's just a few of us, maybe 12 of us, all cops and security personnel, and we're just tagging along in his wake because we don't know why he's walking across to the vehicle ramp. And the only guy standing there at the back of this reception hall is an old school apartheid era police colonel. And he's got his stars and castles here. He's got some scrambled eggs on his cap. And his eyes are getting bigger and bigger and bigger because the president is walking directly towards him. And he's got no idea why either. And Madiba stops in front of him and he puts out his hand and he says to him, Colonel, I just want to tell you that from today, you are now our police too. He said, I'm now the president of this country, but I want you to know that from today forward, there's no more you and us. You are our police too. Now, guys, this old warrior had the lines on his face to kind of prove that he'd pretty much been there and seen it all in a long career. And he started to cry. And the tears were running down those lines on his face and dripping like this onto that wooden floor. And the old man just patted him on the shoulder and said, it's okay, Colonel. I just needed you to hear that from me today. And he turned on his heel, he went back to the car and he said, let's go to the chopper. And Howard, if you had smacked me flat on the nose that day, I would have been less surprised than what I heard him say to my colleague. My rank was only one lower. I was a lieutenant colonel at the time in the South African police. And I am admitting before all of you today, I did not believe the stuff he said when he came out of jail 4 years earlier. When he went to the Grand Parade in Cape Town to make his first speech as a free man. What did he say? He quoted from the Freedom Charter, amongst other things, and he said, South Africa is for all her people, both black and white. And this cynical white cop sitting in his office was going, yeah, whatever. That's what I expected. That was the party line. The other thing it said to me, Howard, this exchange that I heard him have with my colleague, was that 184 of the world's most important people that are there to see him become president can just wait about 2 or 3 more minutes because that colonel needs to hear this message from me today. It said to me that on the very day that Nelson Mandela became our president, he started implementing his agenda of reconciling black and white South Africans and building one nation. He got out of that car and he walked across to a colonel who he'd never met before. And all those people can wait. And that colonel that he went and said this to, guys, he represented the system that pursued him, arrested him, tried him, convicted him, and imprisoned him for 27 years. And yet he finds it in his heart to walk across the floor and tell him that. Well, let me tell you, it changed my world permanently, because from that day forward, despite all my training as a cop, despite my training as a security branch cop, I was so amazed and so impressed that I said, I'm going to give this new South Africa thing a full go. 100% I bought into his dream of one South Africa, lock, stock and barrel. And I still believe it. I miss him every day. But that's a very long-winded way of answering your question. Forgive me, Howard. It's a long answer.
That's absolutely fantastic, Rory. Rory, how did you balance this man of the people with he was the most famous person in the world. How did you balance that with the security requirements? Was there a credible threat ever that you were facing? How did you balance those two?
Oh, great questions, Benji. Yes, there were credible threats from time to time. We didn't have the budget of the United States Secret Service. We did not necessarily have the educational standards of the London Metropolitan Police's special branch or royalty protection unit. But what we did have was a group of men and women who, without being briefed, without being told, or without being trained to, we just almost instinctively, tacitly understood that not only do we protect this guy who is the most famous man in the world physically, but we've got to protect his image, his personality, and his agenda. And if his agenda is to reconcile peoples, then it better start with us. And it did. And so what we became very adept at, Benj, was working in crowds, because wherever Madiba went, he was a crowd. He caused it. And he had this unbelievable ability to want to push the formal agenda aside for a few minutes and just interact with ordinary South Africans. So he loved nothing more, especially when he was courting Mama Grasa, by the way. He wanted to go and buy her chocolates from Godiva Chocolatier in Sandton City. Now imagine what happens when Nelson Mandela walks into Sandton City. He causes mayhem there. And it's our problem to sort out the mayhem. And we became very good at doing that. We knew how to do it. Wherever he was, if there was a child in sight, we knew that he was going to walk across to that child or those children. And so what we would do was prepare them. We would go and tell them, guys, there's a good chance that the president will come here. Please don't get too excited and start jumping around. And whatever you do, don't jump on him. But he's probably going to talk to you, ask you what your names are. He might even sing to you or sing with you. You would do that. He would sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star to groups of children, completely unfazed by, how embarrassing it may sound. Didn't matter. These were kids. And so we would brief them and we would prepare them and we would almost form them into a controlled and polite queue so they would all get to greet him. So we just became very adept at understanding his likes and dislikes. And I don't think that's, unique to President Mandela. People do that all over the world. But the fact is that we were almost part of the persona, people say the aura that was Nelson Mandela. And nobody had to teach us that. It was something that we almost via osmosis, we absorbed it and took it on board. And as I said, it was a privilege, We also, this we understood from our black colleagues, we as white cops, that if Madiba walked into any room where there were people that he had never met before and they happened to be black, they would automatically address him as Tata, which means grandfather. So he was not one, but two generations older than all of us. And in African culture, they have this marvelous, it's not even a belief, it's a practice, that all of the wisdom of a society or of a community resorts in its elders. Not like us who are at times quite happy to park our elderly folk in a retirement village and go and see them a few times a year. Black people will never do that. They have too much respect for the wisdom that resorts, as I say, in the elders. So they taught us that that's how you greet somebody. So we looked at him as a grandfather. And he would often say to us, you must remember that I am your grandfather. He would say that to us. And, we loved him for it.
Rory, we're running out of time, but I have to ask one question.
Sure.
There's
Yes,
a
sir.
time in Parliament when Madiba stands up and referring to you, he says, one of my bodyguards blew up Khotso House and yet he's still my bodyguard.
Exactly. Imagine how devastating that was, for me, because I was a member of, not only was I the commander of the VIP unit, I was the commander of the bomb disposal unit. And that's when Khotso House blew up, and it was in Joburg. Now, the people that actually did that are either in jail today or they received amnesty under the TRC process. But a very vindictive former colleague of mine decided that he would tell everybody that I was the guy that led the recce from that particular unit that went in to plant those explosives, that I was the guy that led the recce into there. Meantime, it was somebody else who is no longer with us, so I don't want to badmouth anybody. I did go in with them, 100%. I won't deny that. We went into the basement of Khotso House, and a few months later, the building blew up. So Mandela and de Klerk are having this debate in Parliament. By then, Mr. de Klerk had withdrawn from the Government of National Unity. He was no longer our second deputy president behind President Mbeki. And they're having this debate in Parliament about affirmative action, and de Klerk is calling it reverse apartheid. And Madiba gets incensed, and he stands up there and he says to him in Parliament, and I'm sitting in Parliament, and he says, what do you mean reverse apartheid? Go and look at my staff. There is every color of skin and every demographic in our country represented there. And by the way, the head of security who's outside there, and I wasn't outside, was responsible for blowing up Khotso House. And the intelligence people wanted me to fire him. And I told him they're not firing him because he's doing a good job. Jeepers, we got home to his house in Cape Town. I said to him, Tata, I need to see you. And he said, come inside. And we sat down there, and I told him this story, that yes, I was in there, but it wasn't me. And he looked at me and he said, that's very interesting. He said, but it doesn't matter whether you were involved or not. We are not looking for those people that were following and carrying out their instructions. We want the people that were giving the instructions. And he said to me, you've done a good job. And I've told the intelligence people, you're not going anywhere. You stay here. So I can't remember who asked the question. I think it was you, Howard. So that was the day, because there is this notion amongst people that watch too many Hollywood movies that, you have this cliche of taking a bullet for somebody. That's not something you say lightly, and it's certainly not something you say when that's your 9-to-5 job. But that day that I told Madiba that I wasn't the guy that blew up Khotso House, but I was in there, and he said it's okay. From that day, I knew, guys, that if I was ever called upon to put myself in harm's way and sacrifice my life for his, that I was prepared to do that, because he was loyal to me long before I was ever called upon to be loyal to him. Because think about it, Howard, who was I? After all, at the end of the day, I was just another white cop. There are hundreds of other lieutenant colonels that he could have said to the intelligence, okay, I agree with you, get rid of him. And they would have just put the next one in. And he said, no, he said, leave that young man there. He's done a good job. So for that reason, I knew that day that if I was ever called upon to do so, I would be prepared to die for him. Thankfully, that never happened.
That's incredible, Rory. Yeah, you've got a really interesting charity that's very close to your heart. Tell us a bit about it.
Well, here it is. I wore this with intention, Benj. So you see the African elephant, which in my view is the greatest animal that God ever created. And it's such a representation of the strength and power and wisdom, of Africa. And you can see him, he's protecting the little cyclist riding there. So as a former cop, the easy thing to do, if I wanted to give back to a charity, I could have given back to the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund or to the Nelson Mandela Foundation. And I am a supporter of the foundation, by the way. But I wanted to do something for cops because I was a cop. And you know what, Benj, it doesn't matter how much we criticize the police. And sometimes they need to be criticized. But that thin blue line stands there for all of us. It stands in the gap for all of us. And when a cop, especially a cop in a rural area in South Africa, when a cop loses his life or her life in the line of duty, it's normally not just one family that loses a breadwinner, because more often than not, that one cop's salary is probably supporting his own family, maybe his sister or brother's family and his parents. And it's a terrible thing for those children to lose a father or a mother. It gets worse when their education is now affected. Their ability to earn a living is affected. So I decided, and I have to thank my friend, the great Australian Test captain, the winningest Test captain in cricket history, Steve Waugh. Steve Waugh has a ride there in Australia every year called the Captain's Ride, and he raises money for children with rare diseases. And in 2015, when he had the first one, I went across to the World Cup in Aussie, and he said, Rory, listen, man, I'm going to do this bike ride in October. I would really like you to come and ride and tell a few Mandela stories. So I said, okay, Taga, I'll do that. And I kept my word and I went. And then I went again in 2016 and again in 2017. And then he said to me, why don't you do something like this in South Africa? So we did. And I stole his whole model, lock, stock, and barrel. I just copied his way of raising this money, which is you get a whole bunch of people to sign up and ride. You invite, like in his case, serious sports people. In my case, I got Stransky, I got Bruce Fordyce, I got Sanani Mangisa, our hockey captain who played in the goals for 100 tests plus for the Proteas. I got Nick Bester. I got Steve Walker himself came, he reciprocated. So as you ride, we rode from PE to Cape Town. As you ride and you sleep over in each little town, one of those names will tell their life story. And so you get this whole leadership element while people have paid good money to listen to that. And all the money goes to the Police Widow and Orphans Fund and
Brilliant.
to the South African Police Service Education Trust. So they educate those kids from tertiary level right down to kindergarten. And pardon me, that's what
Brilliant.
I did.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And give us how do we find out more about it? What's the website?
It's African Icons, plural. So there's an S, africanicons.org.za.
Great. Dan, you will, and Dan's just posted, Rory, Dan's just posted the bank details. And
awesome, guys.
And just it's a fantastic charity that supports all police orphan, no matter what the color, creed, and
Absolutely.
it's an incredible charity. And it's just, on that note, we're getting lots of chats here, just thanking you, Rory, for your openness, guys, and for your great stories about Madiba. And it's such an honor and a privilege. I know you personally. The man you see here is the man you see when you're running, the man you see wherever you are. And you're just a shining light as a South African. And we just thank you so much. It's such an honor to have you on this panel. Thank you so much.
It's my honor, Benj. And I really don't want to take up any more of Justice Sachs and Lwando's time, but I do want to say that the reason I will never say no to the Jewish community is because I went to primary school in Potchefstroom. Now, there is only one English-speaking primary school there. There's 7 Afrikaans primary school. So I have never played a game of soccer for any school team in my life. I played rugby since I was 6, and I'll play rugby until I get to heaven one day. It's the greatest sport. But be that as it may, when I came to Roosevelt High School in Joburg as a standard 6 kid, I didn't know anybody because I'd been at primary school in Potch. And the first little boy who became my mate was a Jewish kid by the name of Ralph Breslauer. Many of you will know him. Their family lived in Linden, and he's still my mate today. His mother, Hazel, became a second mom to me. My parents were divorced. My mother had remarried and was living in England, and Hazel Breslauer became my mom. And the best thing for me, guys, was to go to the Breslauer's home in Linden on a Friday night and have Shabbos, because kitka and lamb is a fantastic combination. And I just love the Jewish community for those reasons and many others. There you go. There's somebody saying that Ralph is her cousin. Good
exactly.
mate. So thank you. You've
Rory,
heard me long enough.
When lockdown is over, come to Benji and me for Shabbos.
We'll give you
deal.
Chitka
You know,
lamb like you've never
Chitka
had,
lamb.
Rory.
100%. If Robbie Brosen is still on the call, he sent me a message. Rob, I'm so sorry I haven't had time to respond to your message, brother. But he took me with his dad and his brothers to their shul. That was the last time I was in a shul, and the last time I had Shabbos was with the Brosen family. And I will take you up, guys. It's a date.
No, lockdown finished.
100%.
We're on, Rory.
Okay.
Take care.
Done.
Thank you so much.
Rory, thank you so much for joining
welcome.
us. And for those people who haven't yet made a contribution this Mandela Day, the bank details are on there, africanicons.org.za. If you'd like to do something, commemorate Madiba, support a charity that is close to Rory's heart, please see the bank details in the chat section now. Rory, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rory.
Thanks, Benj.
Yes. Howie, we're so lucky to have our supporters, and we thank SwitchMart, and Dan, please will you play the SwitchMart ad?
A huge thank you to SwitchMart for the support, and we are just so happy now to be joined by two great South Africans, two true South African icons. So a big welcome to Justice Albie Sachs. Great to see you again this evening, and to Luanda Zazo, great to see you as well. We're going to come to you in one moment, but I think we've seen the magic of storytelling tonight. And I'm sure both of you have such remarkable stories to tell. But just before we do that, you know, the Jewish community have such a long relationship with Madiba that we put together a very short 3-minute tribute to Madiba that we would like to show to people.
I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an idea for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
שמיים וארץ, אל יתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי מעמה השם עושה שמיים וארץ, אל יתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך.
Albie, Luanda, a huge welcome to both of you. Please, if I can ask you to unmute your microphones. Albie, looking at some of those images, it must be very nostalgic for you to see so many faces that I'm sure you recognize.
Well, I recognize the one of Mandela. It's mainly Johannesburg faces in that picture. I'm a Cape Town boy. I was in exile for 24 years. So I don't recognize all that number of faces. Sorry if there's some in the audience viewing, but that's the fact.
So Albie, just many people will know you for many, many things, but your name keeps on coming up. I recently wrote an article about the Freedom Charter, and people like Joy Copland told me how you recruited her at university and you dragged her up to Johannesburg in a train to come to the signing of the Freedom Charter in Kliptown. And of course, we had the 65th anniversary of the signing of the Freedom Charter just a week or two ago. And she said you took her together with Mervyn Benham up to Johannesburg.
Right. Yes, we had a small group from the University of Cape Town. Joy wasn't somebody you dragged. Joy is a very firm person. She was very excited. She was very young. I was very young. And you'll see in many pictures of the Freedom Charter, you'll see a very, very serious young man standing as the police are coming in. Very, very, very thoughtful. That's me. So I kind of, the 20-year-old Albie, a dreamer, a romantic, and now 85-year-old Albie, a dreamer and romantic. I love to feel there's a connection between the young Albie and the Albie who's speaking today.
Luanda is going to take us through a journey together with you in a few minutes, but let us also pay tribute to the fact, like many of the people watching tonight, your family came from Lithuania. They came to South Africa. You were born in Johannesburg, is that correct?
I was born in the Florence Nightingale Hospital, which is right opposite where the Constitutional Court is today. So I went right around the world and I came back to where I started.
But while many people will know you as a judge, as one of the great architects of South Africa's constitution, as someone who was in exile and severely injured while in exile, your father, in fact, was really one of the great stalwarts of the trade union movement in South Africa. Tell us a little about Solly, your dad.
You know, it's funny, I was speaking on another program earlier today, how apolitical I was in my first year at the University of Cape Town. And the only ambition was to go to the intervarsity rugby match between UCT and Stellenbosch. You can't be more apolitical than that. And we had to shout the slogans. Oh, die Saks komt terug. When the Marties scored a try, and then it would be the slogans, and we'd say, yay, Saks, South African College School. Smoke Max. Max was a cigarette then. Brook Lax, the laxative, and Solly Saks. So I'm shouting, yay, Saks, Smoke Max, Brook Lax, Solly Saks. And I realized it's my dad. So he was in Joburg. I grew up in Cape Town. He was a national figure. He was in the news a lot. He was very defiant. He hated apartheid. Lots of members of the Garment Workers Union were Afrikaans-speaking women. He called them rebels' daughters. Their parents and grandparents had fought against the British, gone into concentration camps. They ended up in Germiston, Benoni. They worked in the factories, very poor wages. He organized them. So the regime hated Solly Saks. And they actually sent Jan de Klerk, the father of the F.W. de Klerk, to leave the high school where he was a teacher to fight against, undermine Solly Saks and the Garment Workers Union. He was powerful, he was passionate, he was difficult. At his cremation in Golders Green in London, Sam Khan, the very brilliant South African attorney, spoke at the funeral and he said, I'm sure if God exists, Solly is arguing with him right now. So he was a powerful, tempestuous, a brilliant, warm-hearted, passionate, idealistic figure.
That's an amazing story. So let us introduce everyone to Luanda. Luanda, great to see you again. Welcome. Maybe not quite as high profile as Solly, but one of the great...
I was about to say, you introduced us as icons. Albie is the icon.
You know, Luanda, by the end of tonight, people will understand why I described you as an icon. Not only were you a clerk at the Constitutional Court to one of our great justices in Edwin Cameron, not only do you have a master's magna cum laude from in law, masters in law, but you have become a writer. But more than anything else, you have become one of the great people who holds the tradition of our Constitution and our Constitutional Court together. And in fact, you're doing something called the Constitutional Hill Trust. Tell us a little about that.
Before I tell you about that, I have to just say thank you to Rory and the stories that he shared with us. And also particularly, it really moved me when he called Madiba Dada. Because I'm Xhosa speaking, and that's what I call the closest males, elderly males to me. And, you know, as a Black South African, we're so assimilated into white culture. You know, children today call their parents mom and dad, daddy, and all of that. And to hear a white person refer to Mandela as Dada, for me, it's just the kind of society we want to live in, right? Where there is this kind of cross-cultural pollination that's happening, and it's not just one-sided. And it reminds me a lot of the court. You know, at the court, the judges call themselves brother and sister, my brother, my sister. And that's also a very African thing. And to see people from different backgrounds, experiences, cultures, Black and white, call each other, even in the most difficult of circumstances, brother and sister. For me, I think that's the legacy of Nelson Mandela. Now I've forgotten what your question was, because I was still thinking about what Rory was saying.
Well, I think because it's such a wonderful story, you have to tell the story why, in fact, you became a lawyer.
Okay. On this platform, it's going to sound really shallow and superficial, but, you know, in 1995, I was 11 or 12. I can't remember now. I can't do the maths. And, you know, there was something interesting on television that I'm an only child. So when I came back from school, it's after I've done my homework, it's me and the television. And at that point, I think CNN would come on for a couple of hours a day. and you could watch it and then it would go back to SABC programming. It turns out what I was watching and what captivated me and inspired me to be a lawyer, I didn't know what the thing was at the time, but it turned out to be the O.J. Simpson trial, right? And the prosecutor of that trial is a woman. And I was an incredibly shy child. I wouldn't talk as much as I'm talking now. And to see a woman command a room in that way, I was like, that is what I want to do. And I actually did my school project on Marsha Clark, not knowing that in that same year that I'm watching the O.J. Simpson trial, Nelson Mandela is picking the first judges of the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court is opening its doors. So there is something kind of divine about that timing of what, the time when I was inspired to be a lawyer.
So now you and LB almost have the Punch and Judy show. You are the one who can get LB to tell these remarkable stories about his life, about the Constitution. So I'm actually going to take a back seat now, because it becomes your difficult job to get LB to tell the story of how he went to exile, what it was like in exile. We want to know the stories of Joe Slovo and Ruth First, of people that he knew there, and what happened to him, the stories of the bomb blast, his return to South Africa, crafting the Constitution, and this amazing legacy that is given us in the court. I think most people have probably been to the court and seen this beautiful structure that LB was so responsible for, and the remarkable artworks that is brought in as well. And in essence, you become the holder of that legacy.
It's too big. I think a lot of us that work together, you asked me about the Constitution Hill Trust. Albie and I worked together in the Constitution Hill Trust, which was actually established by our now president, Cyril Ramaphosa, and our first Chief Justice, Arthur Chaskelson, in 2004. And the whole motivation of starting the trust is that they wanted to make sure that our document is not just, the Constitution is not just a document or a piece of paper. They wanted to see it come alive in various ways, through education, through further development of institutions like the court that support our democracy. So that is, the nature of the work Albie and I are doing, the preservation of history. And becoming a holder of the South African story is not just my responsibility, it's for all of us. And we hope to create, a museum for the Constitution where people can come visit and actually experience these stories in a multi-sensory way. And it's been I can't even tell you what a privilege it is to sit with Albie and to listen to the stories. And every time we get to share it on a platform like this, it's just amazing.
Well, Luanda, there are approximately 2,200 people busy watching you right now. So I'm going to turn off my camera, and I give the hard job. I made the mistake once before to try get involved in the session. So it becomes falls to you now to, in fact, get Albie to tell us about himself, his life, and the legacy he gives us all. With that, I turn off my camera.
Hi, Judy. I'm kidding. Hi, Albie.
You've got the only hard job you've got is not to get me to talk, it's to get me to shut up.
And I need to set the agenda, because Howard said we're going to talk about you. That's partially true. It's Mandela Day. And I think that the life of Nelson Mandela should be at the center of our conversation, as it gives us so many lessons and so many stories, And this is where I want to start. I'm going to start in today's time, and then we'll work it back to when you were 17 years old and you met him for the first time. So I always tell, I told Robert Brozet, who's on here, that when Nelson Mandela died on the 5th of December 2013, my instinct was to go to Constitution Hill to mourn him. I was a little bit disorientated. I think we all knew that at some point he was going to leave us, but the finality of it, I just felt that the place for me that embodied his spirit, that, really inspires me, is Constitution Hill. And I think, Albie, a lot of people like claiming Nelson Mandela. A lot of people like speaking his name, but not everyone has the right to speak that name, to be honest, and I'll tell you why I say that. So I went to the court because I had a realization upon his death and listening to all the speeches that were being played, that he was always saying, it's not about me. You know, it's about the values and the ideals. And for me, I went to that place that showed me those values and those ideals that remain, even after people like him have gone behind, have left. So for you, Albie, when you found out that he had passed away on the 5th of December, 2013, what went through your mind? Was it sadness? Was it, relief that he went in such a peaceful way? Because in so many points of history, he could have gone in a very violent way. So can you tell me about that day?
I just landed in Abu Dhabi. I get off the plane, I'm teaching at NYU, Abu Dhabi, and I'm told your president, Mandela, former president, has died. I'm sure you want to go back to South Africa. I said, I don't want to go back. What can I do there? People will arrange a funeral and everything, but I'll speak about him. I'll tell people about him. So I introduced it into my presentations, and I got bombarded by people from all over the world. Even Amanpour from CNN got through to me, and a guy was just holding up a little cell phone. And so that day, I spent a day working, speaking, talking, remembering the person. I remember saying to Christine Amanpour, you know, he's presented as Mr. Nice Guy, and he was a nice guy. But he wasn't just a nice guy. He was a freedom fighter. He was tough. He took hard decisions. He learned to fight. He was scribbling notes about revolution in Rivonia, preparing, if necessary, to give his life for the freedom struggle. But all the time, that center at the core was the belief in humanity, the belief in the cause. He was a great listener. I get a little bit irritated today when people speak about the father of our nation who gave us our freedom. He never wanted that title, and it's an appropriate title because the nation was created by the people. And he was a wonderful listener, a great embodiment of we the people, of the spirit of the people. And that's the greatest quality that he had. Listening to Rory, beautifully told story. We used to make jokes about cops, that they were stupid and clumsy and didn't know how to speak English. And I'm so glad he's helping to refute one of my stereotypes, just in the way he was telling the story. But it wasn't just being nice. It wasn't just being a symbol of reconciliation. It was very, very practical, because so many white men, like Rory himself, were full of disbelief. They had guns. They could destroy the economy. They could assassinate. And his gesture in putting on that number 6 jersey, his gesture in stopping and shaking the hands, he knew that this guy would go around and tell everybody. This guy, the colonel who was such a racist, would tell everybody. And he knew that that was a way to ensure democracy doesn't mean chaos. Democracy means people can live together, we can bring about the changes and the transformation. And why we loved him so much was he never was the leader. Listen to me, follow me. I had a very interesting task of actually having to persuade him that he was wrong during negotiations. He wanted votes to go to 15, 16, 17-year-olds. He was adamant, and he could be very patrician. And the Constitutional Committee said, Comrade Albie, you go and speak to Tata. You know, he's digging in his heels. 3 times I had to say, Comrade President, we can't say that we want 16, 17 years old people to have the vote. People say the ANC is so desperate, they want to get into power with school children. He says, no, they sacrificed very much. I'm not very good at his accent. They must get the vote. And I said, well, that's not the opinion. He said there are 4 countries in the world where young people have the vote. And I asked what they were, and it was North Korea and Yemen and Somalia and some other countries. So in the end, he said, well, I can see I'm getting nowhere, but history will prove I'm right. The interesting thing was 10 years later, when he wanted to nudge President Thabo Mbeki away from his terrible position on HIV/AIDS, he told that story against himself, Mandela against himself, to say I was wrong, and presidents can be wrong. Very, very delicately done, very delicately in that Mandela way of not picking a fight, dropping a hint. Sadly, all that happened was a rather clumsy letter to the newspapers saying old men must shut their traps. So it's more or less to that effect. It didn't have the effect that we wanted, and had to go to the Treatment Action Campaign case in the court to bring about the change. But anyway, so those are my memories of it's combining humanity, warmth, style, compassion with a very hard realism. It's not just to be nice. It's not just to get into heaven afterwards. It's not just to create the ideal society because of the manifesto. It's actually to have more peace, more development, more working together.
And I think one thing that exemplifies what you're talking about, Albie, of his practical nature is that with the advent of the Sharpeville massacre, 60 people shot dead for protesting against passes, a protest that had been organized by the PAC. In the aftermath of that, prior to the Sharpeville massacre, the strategy of the ANC was peaceful resistance, right? Defy, but peacefully. Non-violence was still the creed. Then you have Sharpeville happen. And Nelson Mandela says, I am sick and tired of talking peace and non-violence to a government that does nothing but respond with violence, right? He goes underground. He goes to all the countries in Africa, or a lot of them, to get their support to now shift to an armed struggle. It let me know that peace and non-violence for him was also practical. It was a tactic, and it was a tactic that was failing. And now the times required that he must take up arms. And then later on, the times required that, he must negotiate, right? But all these were pillars of the ANC strategy. And when you look at Nelson Mandela's 60 years of activism, you see different forms of activism depending on what was going on at the time. So I think that speaks to that practicality that you were talking about.
There's a very interesting extra element. After Sharpeville, he's now in the underground. The ANC is banned. You can't even protest about the lack of rights. You can't even complain. You can do nothing. It's submit or fight. But he still carried on. And that year, 60, when South Africa was declared to be a republic, the next year, 61, he's still working underground. And he calls the All-In African Convention, went outside the ANC. And he said, what we need in South Africa is a national convention to draft a constitution for everybody. So it's already a year after Sharpeville. This is the last shot. And when that's completely dismissed and South Africa becomes a republic and there's more brutal repression and people locked up, he creates Umkhonto we see as well, saying we've got to fight back, submit or fight. And he was willing to give his life. And even then, the targets were very clearly chosen. We're not going out to massacre. It's not a racial war. We're going for targets associated with apartheid. And even in the course of the armed struggle, there are different kinds of armed struggles. And it moved over to armed propaganda. The main struggle is the people's struggle, but we would go for particular targets at particular moments to support a strike, to go for a pass office, for some place where people were being brutally treated, try to avoid loss of human life wherever possible. And when the chances came for negotiations, he said, don't come to me, speak to Oliver Tambo, speak to the ANC. That's all the advice that I can give. And he was secretly in touch with Tambo. They were using computer technology. The story's got to come out. It's coming out now. Very, very amazing story to keep in touch. And then the possibility to speak, we would far rather get our freedom without more bloodshed, without more destruction of property, without more hatred, because we want a country. And if we African people don't provide the leadership, we're not going to get it from the whites. They're too selfish, too inward, too wrapped up in their system of superiority. They won't do it, but we will show. And in our ranks, we had people like Slovo, Ruth First, we had people from the Indian community, the colored community, we had people who would have been called tribal chiefs like Dalinyebo, Comrade King. We had religious people. We had a nun who was allowed to go to Parliament afterwards by the Catholic Church. Great diversity of people there, but all believing in these core values of freedom. And somehow Madiba was able to embrace them all and make everybody feel comfortable with him and with his leadership.
I think that's another important point, Albie, that diversity, because Rory touched on it, the sense of bringing people who seem like such polar opposites together and sort of putting them in a position to work with each other, and that leading to some kind of internal transformation, I think was genius. And up until a certain point, the ANC was practically a white party, right?
Never.
Sorry,
I must interrupt you. I wasn't even allowed to join the ANC. Come on.
Oh my God, I misspoke so badly. It was practically a black party, and white people were not allowed to be members up until a certain point. Now, to speak to diversity, right? Why was the decision made to open up the party to other groups of people, to other identities and other races? Why was that important?
Okay, we start with the ANC in 1912 to unite all the African people all over Southern Africa. You know, even in Tanzania, you know their national anthem.
No.
Nkosi Sikeleli, Africa in Swahili. It became the anthem of the whole of Southern Africa. And to this day, it's still the anthem there in Kiswahili. So it was created in that way, a unity of the African people through Southern Africa. It had its ups and downs over the decades, but it was an African National Congress, very important for solidarity. Then those of us from outside the African community wanted to join. There was the Indian Congress, set up initially by Gandhi. Very powerful, struggling fighters, Southern Colored People's Organization. And those of us whiteys, pesky whiteys, please, we want to join, find a place for us, what to do. And they had a meeting, they said, form your own organization of whites. So we couldn't call ourselves the Congress of Whites. So we called ourselves the Congress of Democrats. There weren't a hell of a lot of us. So we had the four spokes of the wheel, the Congress of the People, even at when the Freedom Charter was adopted, four spokes of the wheel. Now everybody's underground. To have four spokes of the wheel underground didn't make much sense. We have the ANC in London, and people come there and they want to meet the ANC. Oh, do you want to meet the black ANC or the white ANC or the colored ANC, the Indian ANC? It didn't make sense to have separate offices in London. You're fighting in Mkonto where seas were. There were people like my friend Wolfie Kodesh, Joe Slovo, Jack Hodgson, who'd been in World War II. They knew how to use guns to make bombs. They were contributing. You've got to tell them you're willing to give your lives. You're training our people in the use of weapons, but you can't join. So MK set the stage for joining. And then you're working in the underground. It just didn't make sense. So the first step that was taken was to say, okay, everybody can join provided you agree to the policy of the ANC, but not at the national executive level. It was only in 1985 at the Morogoro conference. It was one of the big issues on the agenda. And the vote was there. I was actually the person counting the votes on a number of issues. I spoke there as well. And I think the vote was something like, there were about 250 of us to something like 240 in favor of opening the top leadership to everybody. And the people pushing hardest were the young MK people. And they said, we have comrades willing to give their lives for freedom, for the struggle. We've been subjected to torture, who are with us 100%. We say that they somehow are not fit to be full members. And they had people like Joe Slovo in mind when they said that. So it was a progressive, step-by-step process. And for me, it made no practical difference. I was doing what I was doing wherever I was, as I was, and the label put on me didn't make all that much difference.
I want to go back a bit, Albie. You know, the one thing I can claim to have in common with you and Nelson Mandela, other than being South African citizens, is the fact that we are lawyers, right? And so we all know Nelson Mandela was born in 1918. He's born Holihlahla, which means a troublemaker, essentially, or someone who's weathered some storms. And he has weathered some storms. And he, in his book, Long Walk to Freedom, he talks about as a young boy being Mqekezweni, which is one of the villages where he grew up, and seeing some of the chiefs and some of the headsmen actually resolve the disputes of the day, you know, by sitting under a tree. And he was very intrigued by that, right? But he always thought he would be a court interpreter or some lowly civil servant. And then he moves to Johannesburg. And in 1942, he actually starts working. I may get the dates wrong, forgive me. He starts working at a firm in Johannesburg, right? The name is, I always remember Sidalski. I think it's Watkins, Sidalski, Alderman. And he used to get paid £2 a week. And he was now enrolling at Wits because he had just finished, he was going to graduate from his BA and he wanted to do law. And at Wits, he was taught by Professor Harlow, right? And Harlow was a known racist who actually said, women and Africans, law is not for you. And what ended up happening is that Nelson Mandela actually failed. You know, he did terribly. And he felt so bad because he felt he was proving the stereotype right that law was not for Africans. But before we get to that, I always wonder, 1940s, 1950s, with the ramping up of apartheid, why a Black man, you know, would want to pursue a career in law, the very instrument that was being used to oppress him. Because I can imagine when he now has to be admitted as an attorney, he has to take an oath of office to hold up the laws of the country. But at the same time, he's breaching those laws in the Defiance campaign, right? And Sidalski, his boss at the law firm, told him that, you know, you're very smart. And Nelson Mandela actually said Sidalski was a very generous boss. But Sidalski said to him that, please stay away from politics. Which lets me know that as a white man, Sidalski didn't understand that there was no separation between law and politics for Black people. It was the same thing. There's no way you can tell a Black person to stay away from politics. It's your whole life. So Albie, I just want to ask you about this paradox of justice, of being a Black man and wanting to be part of this profession that is going to be, you know, almost upholding the system of laws and legitimizing the system by being a part of it professionally.
Okay. First of all, the oath. I took that oath and I swore to be faithful to wasn't the Republic of South Africa then, South Africa. And I had my fingers crossed. In every respect, I'll pay my taxes, I'll drive within the speed, except I will fight to overthrow the state. So you had that project. The project was to overthrow the state. And you swore the oath because that was a way of getting there. He did this, why? Because a certain Walter Sisulu had said, we need lawyers to carry on the struggle. No conflict at all. It wasn't obedience to the law. It was to get in there to fight for the people with legal knowledge. And it wasn't just Mandela, of course, it was Tambo. And many other people became lawyers at that stage. So it wasn't a kind of internal conflict. How can I be a lawyer and fight? Defiance of Unjust Laws campaign was defying the law as a lawyer. And for me, that was the moment of his real choice, because he's now qualified as a lawyer. He can't vote. He can't have his office in town. He can't move around freely. He has to carry a pass, but he can make money. He can make money, maybe build a nice house for himself in a Black area, maybe even travel. And he decides, I'm going to go to jail. It might mean I'm disbarred, it might mean I'm thrown out of the profession, but my nation, my rights, my dignity have to come first. How can I use law in a way that will serve the nation? And so that wasn't problematic for him. What's interesting was he had an idea about the potential of law, because these elders under the tree were using rationality. They weren't using incantations, they weren't using bones, they weren't using torture, they were using reason and getting reason as a way of bringing people together to understand, to rationalize and justify the decisions, and decisions that would bring the people closer together because you knew that was fair and right. And that built a deep morality in him from early on, and a deep willingness to listen that was now transferred to a wider area. There's a very amusing and rather painful story about his days with Sadelsky, who said, amongst other things, and you'll even drink tea with us, and we've got a special mug for you.
Yes, I was going to ask you about
That's not a very nice one. But there's another one that I picked up, it was actually Oliver Tambo telling it in London, that there was a secretary at the office who was actually very thoughtful, who was absolutely fascinated by this good-looking, serious, thoughtful man, Mandela, and they'd get into deep conversations. And one day they were in a conversation like that, and a client walked in, and this young white woman, she got a big shock, and she said, "Oh, Nelson, here's sixpence, go and buy me some shampoo." And he just felt so shattered, by her timidity, that she couldn't even maintain a decent human contact. So she had to prove that she's the madam, she's the boss. So these little covert things, which sadly continue in different ways to this day, can be as oppressive as the laws that make you show a pass. But the main thing was for him right from the beginning, becoming a lawyer was part and parcel of being in the struggle.
I want to go back to the story with Wits, because it's still so relevant today that you have this Black man with his wife and his children, not only the 2 children he has with Winnie, but his other children as well with Evelyn. And he wants to pursue his educational aspirations. He wants to be a lawyer. He signs up at Wits. He is the only Black student in the law school. Not a lot of people know what that feels like. Never mind being the only Black person in a law school, being the only Black person in any space, whether it's a dinner party, whether it's an office space or whatever it is. And then you have this professor who tells you that you or women are not fit to be lawyers. And then you prove that stereotype right by failing, right? And there's something called a stereotype stress threat, that when someone imposes the stereotypes on you, it encumbers you to a point where you actually fulfill the stereotype, and it does that. But then
it was more than that, Luwando. He had to travel so much, he had to work so hard, he had so little time. It was a combination of factors. And you add to that, instead of the professor going out of his way to be supportive, the professor who uses words like equity and justice and fairness, and he was a terrible sexist. It wasn't just a racist. I mean, he was consistent in his exclusiveness. And Haller, I think Haller came from Germany. He came from a country, society where Jews had been persecuted, but it didn't stop him from having Übermensch mentality in relation to the new society he was in. It's such a shameful episode, and Wits, ought to find some way of exercising, because it wasn't just Mandela. It didn't just stop there.
It's happening today, Albie, and I wanted to get to that point because it gets excluded from Wits. And one thing you introduced me to are Nelson Mandela's letters to Wits. Through you, I was able to access that archive, and he writes the most painful stories of why he has failed. He's working at Sadelsky. He earns £2 a week, and most of his salary has to go to buying candles because he has no electricity and he has to study by candlelight, right? I'm a husband. I've got children. Most of the time I'm hungry because I don't even earn enough money. Everything I have has to go to my family. And when I talk to certain students today in democratic South Africa, they are still pursuing their education under those very similar circumstances without any grace from these institutions of that understanding that you're saying that Hello should have had, right? So it's weird to see this continuation of some of the things that plagued Nelson Mandela and actually kept him oppressed, right? And then I want to move to another interesting.
But before you move, I'm not going to allow you to move, Lwando. You add. I think the points are absolutely valid, and they're points that I made. But the other side to the story is he didn't give up.
Yes.
He didn't give up.
Really.
He got support from others. He got support from others from different communities, but very much from the African community. He never gave up on his ideals. He wrote a beautiful book. You read his letters. He's on Robben Island. There's nobody going to write his letters for him in his own handwriting. He was so eloquent and so thoughtful. That's the other part of the story.
And he finally gets that law degree years later, right? And we'll get to that. But I want to, another story that intrigued me that he tells in his book is that when he was working at Sadowski, and I think this offers a lot of important lessons for leaders and for South Africans in general, is that he meets the Basotho Queen, because Sadowski, I think, had a matter that implicated her. So she came to the offices, and Nelson Mandela is a Xhosa man, and he had just come from the Transkei into Johannesburg. He only spoke isiXhosa and English, and he meets the Basotho Queen, and the Basotho Queen speaks to him in Sotho. And Nelson Mandela doesn't know how to respond, but he's already expressed to the Queen that he wants to be a leader one day. And the Queen was like, there's no way you can lead your people if you can't speak their language. And for me, what I take from that story, it's not a literal sort of you have to learn every South African language, but you need to be able to relate to your people, whether you're a CEO of an organization, a teacher, whatever it is, in order to be able to lead them. And then he learns these languages, and importantly, he learns Afrikaans. Why did he learn Afrikaans, Albie?
He felt, if I want to understand the oppressors, the gods, the people in power, I've got to know who they are, how they think, how they feel, how they sing, how they dream. Not just information so that I can decode their messages, but who are they? What makes them tick? Why do they do the things that they do? It's very profound, very, very thoughtful, and very meaningful. So when he goes up to this coronel afterwards and shakes his hand, he knows that he's not some kind of lordly English prince putting out his hand and being kind to the equivalent of the natives. He knows that it's going to be overwhelming to this guy who's a racist, who fears Black people. He knows that he's doing something emotional that's transcendent, that's significant. So that's part and parcel of the democracy in his head. But it's a democracy not just based on voting, it's based on human dignity, understanding, and respect for others. And that was what's so great. I've just been doing a lot of reflection these last couple of days on qualities of leadership. And one can never praise Madiba enough, and yet he's been overpraised because it's singling him out of a tradition, of a culture. And I want to say, hey, what about Albert Luthuli? I'm a soldier of Luthuli. I was a soldier of Luthuli. He had that same quality. He set the standard. Oliver Tambo, I was very, very close. I speak about Oliver Tambo all the time. Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, 4 people. And we had Albertina Sisulu, and we had Lelele Ngoyi. We had so many others, great, wonderful people. There's something, it's not in our water, it's in our culture, it's in our tradition, it's in our suffering, but it's in our idealism that comes all the way through. So these are profound qualities of humanity. And if we get through, well, we haven't used the word Ubuntu. And we never use the word Ubuntu. It's not a very revolutionary. Amandla is much more powerful than Ubuntu when you're fighting, when you're about to be smashed and tortured and so on. But that was really the foundation of it all. That Ubuntu that he noticed in his village community, playing itself out in a very, very meaningful way, that he noticed in the underground, in the resistance, that he noticed on Robben Island. The conditions were awful, were terrible, but they held together. There's a wonderful solidarity, even when they argued politically, ANC, PAC, Governor Mbeki pushing his way and so on, they had that sense of solidarity. And this is something the world needs. Maybe in this era of COVID-19, we feel it more than ever now. The qualities not just of slick political handling, not just smart, clever, thoughtful reasoning to bring others on board, but that intense humanity, everything starting from inside, human dignity, humanity, fairness, sharpness. There was something about, it could be very patrician, easily stung, very proud, but he would calm down, become quiet, control his own anger, and listen and move along. It was so wonderful to see.
Bob Heppel says he had some kind of bravado. So I can just imagine that. I want to move on to two trials that really sort of, highlight his qualities as a lawyer and as an activist. And the first trial I want to go to is of 1962. So we said that after after South Africa became a republic and he gives up on peace and non-violence, and he goes to learn to be a soldier and to garner support for an armed struggle, he comes back into the country, right? And then he decides that he wants to go to Natal. And people tell him, don't go from Johannesburg to Natal because people are looking for you. And Bob Heppel, when he tells the story, is that Nelson Mandela almost did not care about being caught. There was such a sense of urgency about what he wanted to do. You know, he wanted to shake things up, that he wasn't worried about being caught. And indeed, he does get caught in Natal. He gets arrested, and where is he imprisoned? At the Old Fort, which today is the home of the Constitutional Court, right? It's Constitution Hill. He's held at the Old Fort, but he's not held in number 4. Number 4 is the black section of that prison. He's actually held in the white section. And Bob Heppel says it's because he was able to sketch out, plans of the prison and to smuggle them out. And there was this fear that the ANC would try to break him out. So they kept him in the hospital room, which is in the white section, right? And then Joe Slovo was supposed to be his lawyer, but the trial got moved to Pretoria, and Joe Slovo was under banning orders in Johannesburg. So he got Bob Heppel to be Nelson Mandela's lawyer. Nelson Mandela said, I'm not going to need a lawyer for this one. You can guide me, right? They are, they're bringing a legal trial, but we all know that this is not a political trial because he was arrested for having left without a passport. And he said, well, this government won't give me a passport. And he was also arrested for a stay away that he had organized, right? A labor resistance. And now he's saying that this is not a legal trial, it's a political trial, and I'm going to represent myself. And I'm actually going to ask the magistrate to recuse himself, right? And he delivers this amazing speech that I learned about through speaking to you, called A Black Man in a White Man's Court, right? And he delivers that speech wearing a kaross, leopard skin. And for Xhosa people, it's royalty that wears the leopard skin. And Bob Heppel asked him, why did you wear that? He's like, I want to communicate to my people that I'm a proud African nationalist, right? That I'm a proud African man in a black court, in a white court. Why is that speech something you talk about so often, Albie? And I have to thank you because it's one of the best things that I've ever read. And it's so good that when Bob Heppel sent it to London for the London newspapers to run it because it was censored in South Africa, people wrote to Heppel saying, you wrote that on behalf of Mandela, didn't you? And Bob Heppel said every single word was him. That's how brilliant it was. And it shows his skill as a lawyer. Why was that speech important, Albie, in 1962?
It was defiant. He's now in the court. He's not dressing in his lawyer's suit. He's not humbly pleading with the magistrate. They didn't know about his work at Rivonia at that stage. So had maximum sentence of 5 years. And it's beautifully phrased. He asked the magistrate, he said, Your Worship, I have the greatest respect for you as a person. I'm not challenging you as an individual, but I feel I'm a black person in a white man's court. And he ends up by saying, and in South Africa, it's the guilty who drag the innocent before the court. I've never forgotten that phrase, but when I read it afterwards, it was really a signal now. In the very heart of oppression, he's now defiant, standing up. And people there remembered it. And people remembered it also because he looked different. He looked so proud. It was long before decolonization. It was long before even Frantz Fanon, wasn't part and parcel of the thinking. This was Mandela himself feeling how he should challenge and be remembered. Afterwards, of course, he's put on trial. the Rivonia trial. They're facing the death sentence. And again, that magnificent speech. I can say that something was added right at the end, where George Bezos says, Nelson, you say, for these ideals, I'm prepared to die. Isn't that a challenge to the judge to hang you? Shouldn't you say, if needs be? And if you look at the text, you'll see, and for these ideals, and it's written in on top, if needs be, I'm prepared to die. So he was willing to listen, to change little touches, but this was his thought expressed in his very beautiful, eloquent way.
There's so many symmetries, Albie, because you have this moment in 1962 where he's putting white supremacy on trial, right? And he's saying that this is not an African court. And then we fast forward to 1995, him inaugurating a brand new court, a court conceived from the African imagination, the Constitutional Court of South Africa. At the Rivonia trial, you have him, at the mercy of the death penalty. And Arthur Chaskelson is one of his lawyers. And Arthur says the strategy of the Rivonia trial was to put the whole country on trial. And they did that successfully. And Arthur says that one of the people that gave evidence was Alan Payton, mitigating against the death penalty. And you know what reason he gave as a mitigating factor? He said to the government that you're going to have to negotiate, and you're going to have leaders to negotiate with. So if you kill these people, they know leaders to negotiate with. And for me to go to that moment where you're facing the death penalty and people are mitigating on your behalf that you shouldn't get the death penalty, you end up building a new court. And that new court's first judgment is on the death penalty. There are all these full circle moments, right? And I think I want to move to that. I want to move to the fact that we all know the story that eventually he comes out of prison. There's so much we can talk about because of time. I'm just going to fast forward to the 90s and the story of Nelson Mandela and the building of the Constitutional Court. I want to ask a couple of things, Albie. One, why a new court? Why? And I'm told that it was Nelson Mandela and a few other people's idea to have a new court. Number two, he inaugurates the court, right? And he says that the last time I was in a courtroom, I was facing the death penalty, and today I'm the president of a country inaugurating a new court, right? What did that moment feel like for you as one of the 11 judges sitting up there with him? And number three, what was it like for you to be on a court that now had to judge Nelson Mandela, who was now a litigant before the court, right? And do you think the court is fulfilling the vision of this African concept of justice that he had been yearning for all the way back in 1962?
Okay, it meant a huge amount to us being sworn in as judges, that Mandela was there at the inauguration. And of course, he opened with that amazing statement. The last time I was in court to find out if I was going to be sentenced to death. Today, I inaugurate South Africa's first constitutional court, the cornerstone of our democracy. He underlined that. So he wasn't a president as though he was gifting us something. He was a president acknowledging the existence of the court. We were in temporary accommodation then. It was very, very crowded. We felt very thrilled. We felt this is the beginning of something very, very new. And it was important. We have a separation of powers, but we also have a concertation of powers. It's one constitution, it's one project. The parliament, the presidency, the judiciary, all belong to that same project. We get into tension at times. That's the duty imposed upon us under the Constitution. Freni Janwala was there representing Parliament. We felt that importance of that moment, a new sovereignty, a sovereignty under law, under the rule of law. And of course, he had style. He didn't make a boring speech. It wasn't something written by a speechwriter that he was just reading. It came from his spirit, his soul, his knowledge, his feeling. So that was great. Then the very next day, the first case we have is on capital punishment. And he sends George Bezos on behalf of government to strike down the laws that allowed for capital punishment. I'm told that F.W. de Klerk was furious in cabinet. And he said, we want capital punishment. They couldn't imagine a state that didn't hang its citizens. Mandela couldn't imagine our new democracy where we cold-bloodedly put a noose around someone's neck and killed them. So he sent counsel to argue on behalf of the government against capital punishment. Of course, he was delighted when we unanimously decided, not because it was Mandela sending the lawyer to argue on his behalf, but because we felt as a matter of understanding our constitution that had to be. But 6 months later, we had an important case where Mandela himself had issued proclamations challenged by the Nationalist Party in the Western Cape, and we upheld the challenge because Parliament had asked Mandela to issue proclamations for the holding of the first democratic local government elections. Everybody wanted them, they were very good. But we said Parliament can't pass lawmaking authority to the president. Parliament has to do it itself. We struck it down. Now, how's Mandela going to react? He appointed us. He was in jail for 27 years. What right have these judges got to tell him how to govern? He went onto television. I remember sitting in the lounge there, watching, and we had switched on the TV. And he said, I was advised by my legal advisor that I had authority from Parliament to pass the proclamations. I now accept that that advice was wrong. And I, as president, must be the first. He wasn't gesticulating like I am, very, very calmly, first to show respect for the Constitution as interpreted by the Constitutional Court. We felt huge delight. For me, that day was as important as the day we voted as equals for the first time. Because that was the day South Africa went from being a democracy to being a constitutional democracy. And once the president accepted the supremacy of the Constitution as interpreted by the court, afterwards, Thabo Mbeki, when we ruled effectively against him on Navarre-P and the Treatment Action Campaign, he wasn't happy, he accepted it. Jacob Zuma, the ruling of the court in the Nkandla decision, he wasn't happy, but he accepted it. Something was established that's been permanent in this country. It's something I think all South Africans can be proud of. And it was certainly helped by the fact that Mandela didn't feel affronted. He actually felt it was almost as if he rose in prestige, as if to say, and you see what a marvelous country I'm the president of. You know, he had that largeness of vision to see that the project was greater than the person. It wasn't a personal affront, that he could be part of that larger project. And in addition, by the way, he was fun. When we had a competition for the new building on this amazing site, then a derelict, rundown prison, weeds growing everywhere and so on, we had this vision, one day it's going to be a beautiful site, turning swords into plowshares, spears into pruning hooks. That was our kind of philosophy. And he had to announce the winner of the competition. And we went into one of the cells, not the cells, one of the big exercise areas. Lulu Gwagwa was Deputy Director of Public Works. Very, very clever, very smart. And she was saying, Mr. President, now it's over to you to open the envelope. And please, I beg you on behalf of the audience, don't make a long speech. You know, some people make very, very long speeches. Don't make a long speech. And he starts off, he says, I feel very uncomfortable, distinctly uncomfortable. Now, I know what's going on, you see, because I know Madiba, and I see my colleagues getting very, very edgy. I spent 27 years in prison, and now I find myself in prison again, and I can't wait to get out. And to make matters worse, I see another jailbird, and he points to me over there. So he, you know, had a way of having fun. And then he says, and the winner of the competition is, and he takes a glass of water and he puts it down, opens up, the winner is, and he announced the winners, two young architects from Durban and a town planner from Johannesburg. He loved that building. To see him and Arthur Chaskelson walking around at a stage when we were putting up the new building and Mandela's retired, these two elderly men, very tall, and luckily they had to wear hard hats because like me, they're dreamers. They would have banged their heads all the way, you know, bending down a little bit, talking about the architecture and the building, but with such affection, an affection of people who'd seen hard times in life. Arthur having to overcome privilege, if you like, Mandela having to overcome oppression. And now they're together in this project called the Constitution, in this building that's going up on the site of the old prison. This is a miraculous part, a beautiful part of South Africa. It's inventive, it's imaginative, it's deeply humane. For me, those were very, very special, very lovely moments.
I want to start wrapping up and give other people an opportunity to ask you questions. And before I ask my last one, I see the shirt you're wearing. Is that Nelson Mandela inspired fashion, Albie?
You know, you wanted me to wear the people.
We the people. For those who don't know, this is a Constitution Hill Trust supported project. It's a T-shirt by an amazing South African designer, Tepo the Jean Maker. You'll be able to get yourself one at Woolies. Albie has one, but I said he could wear, I mean, look at his Mandela shirt. It's amazing.
You know, I thought on his birthday, I've got to wear a Mandela shirt. I mean, that's one of the big things we have in common. We joined the Defiance campaign and we both wear Madiba shirts. They're not called sack shirts that he wore. They're called Madiba shirts that Albie wears. I love them. And I just read the other day in something being prepared for the Constitution Hill website that when Mandela was now about to be sworn in as president, he received a note from F.W. de Klerk saying he must wear a top hat and wear a jacket with tails. Did you find it? Okay.
It was Jesse Duarte who told that story, but please tell it. I'm becoming an archivist now, so I found that story.
And he said, please, I want to go as myself. So that was long before decolonization. There was nothing had to fall, something had to rise. And I love these. I love these Mandela shirts. They're comfortable, they're stylish. When I got an honorary degree at Cambridge University, I wore it, you know, for the most posh, smart kind of occasions, I wear it. It's easy to travel with, you can fold it easily. So that's amongst all the things that I owe to Mandela, I owe a comfort of being able to dress stylishly in the way that I like. And I feel a great kinship with him, particularly on this day.
Me too. I feel a kinship with him and so many people of that ilk, just by even wearing the We the People t-shirt as a reminder of this sort of generational call for unity, you know. But, you know, Albie, as a point of wrapping up, I want to say quite seriously that it's been a difficult couple of months, you know, of the pandemic and all that it has revealed to us. And I think as horrible as things may seem, and I see someone here is talking about being disillusioned, and we'll get to that question, is that for me, in my life, as short as it's been so far, is that the darkest day in South African history was when Chris Hani was assassinated. I was 9 years old. I remember that my parents couldn't even tell me that it's going to be okay, like they would with a child. They were distraught. And I remember thinking, this is it. This must be what the end of the world feels like, when your own parents can't even tell you as you go to bed that the world is going to be okay. You know, to see terror in people who are older than you and feeling insecure and unprotected. And then you have him coming on television, Nelson Mandela, and saying, you know, throw away your guns, you know, let's come together. And thanks to this white woman, we've found the people who've assassinated Hani. And that's the moment a lot of people say he became the president of South Africa. Even before the election, he was the shadow president, right? So for me, it's like as South Africans, we have tools. Our history tells us we have tools of how to get through particularly difficult moments because we've done it so many times before. And I think Nelson Mandela's life calls me to be forward looking at all times and not dwell on or be beat down by challenges, right? Because when you look at his life, at what moment could Nelson Mandela say, oh, things are going great in this country? He grew up in a South Africa that was brutal and oppressive and just, you know, circumstances I can't even imagine as someone who was born much later, right? And for me, I guess I want to say, what does Nelson Mandela's life, his values, call us to be in this moment. And as South Africans, because I always say that I'm South African through and through, and it's not just the feel-good Nelson Mandela stories. It's the good and the bad that I accept as being South African and still finding a way to find a way forward, right? And not to give up on our country. It is worth fighting for. South Africa is worth fighting for. So I want to know from you, why is South Africa worth fighting for? Why did Nelson Mandela dedicate his whole life, even when he came out of prison? He said, the remaining days of my life belong to you. What drives a person to do that for their country? And what lessons, Albie, can we learn from the history, especially in the 90s with all of that violence and that darkness, that we can use as tools in this particularly dark moment?
Well, I think, Luando, just thinking back, we've actually got through much, much worse. Maybe for well-off people today, they can't imagine how it was under apartheid. But our people were dying, they were being killed in detention, being blown up. There was massive oppression everywhere, but we never let go of that idea of having a dignified, decent, non-racial, and we added non-sexist society. We never let go of that ideal. And we got it. We got those glorious, rapturous moments, but we got a constitution, we got institutions, we've got free speech that we can say what we want now, you and I speaking to each other. I also remember, and people have forgotten how terrible it was when HIV was hitting our country. It wasn't just people were dying, hundreds of thousands. It was from the top, there was denialism. It was worse, much, much worse, the impact than the COVID-19. By 100, literally 100 times worse. 300,000 people died of preventable deaths in the 1 year because they weren't getting antiretrovirals. We got through that. And we got through that, a combination of factors. It had a lot to do with treatment action campaign, people on the ground. It had a lot to do with journalists telling the truth. It had a lot to do with lawyers and courts. It had a lot to do with our constitution, all of these things coming together. We had the strength and the vitality, and now South Africa has the biggest antiretroviral program in the world. So I feel applying, if you like, these lessons. I don't like the word sacrifice. I don't think Mandela ever felt he sacrificed anything. Maybe the closest would be he sacrificed his children. They sacrificed on his behalf. We would have sacrificed our own dignity if we hadn't taken a stand. That would have been the sacrifice. Not to fight would have been a sacrifice of your deep inner self. So those were the things that gave meaning to his life, gave him love, gave him heartbreak, gave him love again, made him interested in painting, in a whole range of different things. Made him one day somebody sitting in his room and the phone rings. Oh, Elizabeth, Nelson here. How are the children? He could speak to the Queen of England like his friend. Before you would go as a humble servant bowing to the Queen Victoria. Now he's speaking as an equal. She wants to phone him rather than he phoned her. It was magnificent. It was funny. It was amazing. It was marvelous. So it wasn't just powerful people. Michael Jackson, Naomi Campbell, people important in the general world wanting to associate with South Africa. So these are things that I think give me hope and encouragement as a South African. I remember I was very close to Chris Hani. His wife Dimple stayed with me for months in Maputo with the children. I was in the underground with him in Cape Town. He was a brilliant, wonderful, wonderful person in many ways. That day he died was also the worst day in my life and the most frightening day in my life. And I remember as we were driving to the funeral afterwards at Orlando Stadium, the crowds outside saw a white man, that's me, in an ANC bus, and they were banging on the side of the bus. If they'd got me, they would have killed me. And the comrades were saying, don't get out, don't go and try and reason with them or anything. It was a terrifying day, but we got through it. We got through it through organization, thoughtfulness, planning, and providing an alternative and getting to elections. That was absolutely vital. Without elections, the country would have exploded. So I would say that spirit of Mandela, it's not a kind of blind optimism. It's a deep internal confidence about humanity and a capacity not to be trapped in pain, in the past, in sorrow, in anger, to lighten up and to feel the possibilities in yourself, in others, to transcend, to turn the sword into a plowshare. It's those possibilities. You take that energy and you turn it around. So we've got now COVID-19. It's keeping us apart. It's attacking everybody. Build unity out of that. When the vaccine comes, that's going to be a huge test for humanity. Will it be provided in what I call the spirit of Mandela and Tambo and Chief Lutuli and all the others who contributed? Will it be available for everybody, or will it be appropriated by some pharmaceutical company, a president of a certain country fighting for his nation to be the first? These are tests of our humanity, of our universality, of our Ubuntu. And I'm hopeful to feel that that spirit of Ubuntu, which is coming through Black Lives Matter in a way, is Ubuntu being expressed in particular American terms, seeing the pictures today of our cricketers getting a couple of political thoughts in their head, some going along because that's captain's orders, some doing it because they really feel it. I feel that sense of that continuing optimism that I associate with people like Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela.
Perfect note to end on my side, Albie, and always thank you. Thank you for this journey we've been on. Thank you for teaching me. And thank you for this idea that our work as the Constitution Hill Trust is to further strengthen that constitutional democracy that you were talking about, to build trust in our constitutional democracy. So thank you for your work, Albie. And if anyone wants to support our work, Howard did share the details of where you could contact us.
Absolutely, Luanda. We've had so many questions from people for Albie and for yourself, but tell us how people can help you at the Constitutional Hill Trust.
So if you email ceo@constitutionhilltrust.org, we'll be able to share information on the projects that we're working on. A lot of it is recovering this history, and preserving it from people like Rory, from people like Albie, and creating a space where people can come and learn about how we made our Constitution. Because we believe if you know your history, no person can ever claim to be fully liberated. No nation can claim to be fully liberated if they don't know and accept their history. So part of that is understanding the history of our Constitution and building a physical space at Constitution Hill, because the idea that Arthur Chaskalson had, and Nelson Mandela and Albie and all the judges of the court, is that turning Constitution Hill from a prison complex to a human rights complex, the beginning of that was the court, but it wasn't supposed to be the end. We were supposed to develop it further, and now that's what we're doing. We're invoking that dream again by building a museum, a state-of-the-art museum, where people can actually come and learn and be exposed to an amazing experience. It's going to be called the Museum and Archive of the Constitution at the Hill. We may change the name, but if you want to contribute to that in any way, please email us. But we're also working on an online exhibition where you can hear some of the stories that Albie and I were talking about. The website will be launching in a couple of months. I don't want to share the name of the website because I don't want people to go to the URL before it's ready. And also we run educational programs where we teach young people about how the Constitution works. If you're going to make a difference in this country, you have to know what the laws of this country require. If we're going to strengthen our constitutional democracy, we have to work with students and young people and children. So we raise funds to actually create amazing experiences and to bring young people to Constitution Hill, to see this amazing building, to see how the court works. Luckily, if they can, to meet some of the judges like they did last year. They met Justice Cameron. So there's so much that we're working on. And we're working on a We the People campaign. So also support by buying this T-shirt at Woolies when it's out.
We want to thank you so much. Albie, there's so many people who have just asked, can you just tell some stories about yourself? You are such a remarkable storyteller, such an inspirational individual. Can you tell us the story of that fateful day when the bomb went off at your car?
Okay, it's the 7th of April, 1988. I'm in Maputo. It's the Dia de Mulher Mozambicana, the day of the Mozambican woman, a public holiday. And I'm going to the beach. Time off in the morning, and there'll be meetings in the afternoon. And I don't know, something terrible is happening to me. I don't know what it is. It's very dark. I used to be a very keen mountaineer, and it was like the concussion if I hit my head on an overhang. But the darkness is not going away. And I know something terrible is happening. And I hear a voice, and the voice says into the darkness in Portuguese, Albie, this is Ivo speaking. You're in Maputo Central Hospital. Your arm is in a lamentable condition. You have to face the future with courage. And I say into the darkness, what happened? And I hear a woman's voice saying, it's a car bomb. I fade back into the obscurity with joy. I know I'm in the hands of Frelimo, of the Mozambican government. I haven't been kidnapped to be thrown into jail in South Africa. That moment that every freedom fighter is waiting for, will they come for me? If they come for me, will I be brave? They'd come for me, they tried to kill me, and I had survived. And I faint back into obscurity. Some time passes. I'm lying on my back, my eyes are covered, I'm feeling very light. And I tell myself a joke. It's about Jaime Cohn, who, like me, as you know, is a Jew. He falls off a bus and he does this, and someone says, Jaime, I didn't know you Catholic. What do you mean Catholic? Spectacles, testicles, wallet and watch. And I'm lying there and I'm telling myself that joke. And for some reason, I started with testicles, and I, who've tried all my life to be macho without any success, I became the great hero in the ANC camps. And the first thing Comrade Albie did was reach for his horse. Seemed to be in order. Wallet, my heart, if my heart's damaged, I'm in trouble. Seems to be okay. My hand goes up if it's brain, spectacles. There was a crater there. Okay, and then my hand slides down. I've lost an arm. I've only lost an arm. Somebody says that's the definition of an optimist. But I had that feeling then of total confidence. As I got better, my country, South Africa, would get better. And it happened. It wasn't based on evidence. It was just that total conviction. And somehow that bomb blew away all the unhappiness and sadness of the time I'd spent in solitary confinement, the time in exile, problems I'd had with a marriage that wasn't working out. It was all blown away by that bomb. I'd survived that, and I'm starting life again. And it was a moment of transcendence for me. Some months later, weeks later, I'm lying in hospital in London. And I get a letter, and I love saying, some of the older people remember letters. We used to lick the stamps. And I open the letter. Don't worry, Comrade Albie, someone's written, we will avenge you. And I'm thinking, avenge me? We're going to cut off the arms? We're going to blind in one eye? Is that the country we are fighting for? But if we get freedom, if we get democracy, if we get justice, roses and lilies will grow out of my arm. That will be my soft vengeance. And that phrase, soft vengeance, just stayed in my head. I heard afterwards they'd caught one of the bombers, and I said, if they put him on trial and he's found not guilty because the evidence is not strong enough to convict him, that will be my soft vengeance, because then we're living under the rule of law, and that's much more important than one rascal goes to jail. So when afterwards I come back to South Africa and we're writing our new constitution, that's my soft vengeance. We're voting as equals for the first time. That's soft vengeance. I'm put onto the court. We abolish the death penalty. We put up this beautiful new building. All of that is my soft vengeance. And I found that theme of converting the energy of negativity, of pain that's been inflicted into positivity, not in some phantasmagorical, crazy sort of a way, but in making positive, putting up the court on the site of the old prison, writing a constitution that upholds the highest ideals and guards against the deepest darkness that's possible, all at the same time, building in that tension between aspiration and hope and skepticism and caution on the other. These are all part and parcel for me of this concept of soft vengeance, which I find is more powerful than hard vengeance. Hard vengeance just means we're stronger. Now it's our turn. Soft vengeance means it's a victory for our ideals, it's for humanity, it's for people, it's for being together. It's helped me in my personal life. It's something that I feel absolutely consistent with the Constitution, the values of the Constitution. It was a great support and consolation for me when we're writing the judgments on the court. And it's exciting when I see the museum and archive being built on Constitution Hill so that these stories can come through, so that when we have problems about the land and expropriation, we can have thoughtful, passionate, meaningful debates, not going for votes or to denounce anybody. When we have problems about hate speech, we can have thoughtful, meaningful discussions. Where we want to discuss gender-based violence, how can these things happen? How can you call yourself a man when you're doing things like that? Who are the people? But they're us. They're from our families, our communities. These kinds of things can be interrogated on the Hill. We want it to be a place where people are not scared to deal with the most difficult issues, but always in a way of seeking further humanity, further understanding, further compassion, further thoughtfulness, further generosity, and hopefully lots of laughter, genuine laughter, lots of music, lots of expression of people being allowed to be who they are.
LB, the final question. We've been going for 2 hours. We still have more than 1,600 people busy watching us between Zoom and on YouTube as well. But it's been a remarkable evening of inspiration. And you come from a long history of a politically active family, but the youngsters today, many of whom have grown up only knowing a degree of freedom. What final inspirational thoughts can you give to those people who never suffered the way you did, who have only experienced life in a new South Africa? How do we make this all relevant to them, that they don't take things for granted and they actually live the values that you enshrined into our Constitution every single day?
You know, Howard, I've got a stock answer to that, but it's getting weaker and weaker all the time. When young people ask me what advice can I as an older person give to them, I always say the same thing. The only advice I'll give to you is don't listen to the advice of old people like me. Be as cheeky, irreverent, challenging, curious, demanding as we were when we were young, when we were woke, when we were demanding and challenging. But they're not satisfied with that answer. I don't know. I just want to tell my stories. People can take from them what they will. But what I can say for myself, from my own life, I'm glad you don't have to go through the things we had to go through to get just simple elements of dignity and freedom in this country. I'm glad you don't have to risk going to jail and being subjected to sleep deprivation. I'm glad you don't have to be heroic and lose your arm in the struggle. I used to say already in 1990, one of the paradoxes of the lives of my generation is we were fighting with all our passion to create a boring society. By boring, I don't mean it's not interesting. I mean, without the drama, the epic, the challenge, the 27 years in jail, the torture, the death sentences. So at least be aware of the possibilities that you have today. Be imaginative, be thoughtful, listen, make up your own minds, help people like me to understand better what's going on. As you see it, as you experience it, I need it. It fertilizes me, it energizes me. I think that that's all that I can really say. But Don't give up hope on the possibilities of beauty in the world, of decency and dignity. You'll find them in the most unexpected places, the most unexpected moments. There are lots of wonderful people. There are lots of lousy people who've got little bits of wonderful qualities hidden away in them. Always go for the potential of what's good, what's beneficent, what makes yourself feel better, what makes the world feel a little bit better. These things are self-fulfilling. They'll get you through lots of dark passages and give you a sense of enjoyment of life.
Albie, the mere fact that you can inspire people like Luanda to be the sort of human being that she is and to devote her life to helping to enshrine these principles into all of our lives should be testament enough for you. Thank you, Luanda, Albie. Thank you so much for your time. It has been the most remarkable evening. 102 years ago today, Nelson Mandela was born and changed all of our lives. And what we have to do is to make sure that we find that little bit of Nelson Mandela in each of us and to go out and change the world for better ourselves. So thank you to Rory, thank you to Luanda, thank you to LB for joining us this evening. It's been absolutely remarkable and inspiring. 67 minutes today. We hope you gave your time. We hope you've given some money as well to one of the great causes. We've raised millions and millions of rands for charity. My Melrose Can today did a blanket drive in Kliptown in Soweto. We delivered hundreds and hundreds of blankets during the cold Johannesburg nights into Kliptown as well. So just find something where you too can make a complete and utter difference to the world you live around. A reminder as well that in fact our next webinar will be on Thursday, and on Thursday evening, I don't know, LB and Luanda, if you've watched on Netflix, I don't know if you've watched at all, an amazing TV series called Founder. No. We'll be interviewing Aladaka, one of the main actors from Founder, on Thursday evening. Dan, show us, if you don't mind, a little video from Founder itself. It feels like almost you get PSD from just watching each episode of Founder.
جاي حفلة ليه لا؟
بفكر في الموضوع.
אני andiamo da una cucciola solo un po' di divertente. Il banco quello come comando me odio manen.
רוצים לפעולה משותפת במה ימם. זה לכם ברור, חברון זה לא שכם.
Welcome to غزة.
اليوم بكسرك.
في شفطك جايبي وريحته طالعة. قطعته للبحر.
So please join us on Thursday night when we speak to Aladaka and hear about all of his experiences in filming Founder. And for those of you who haven't watched, go onto Netflix tonight. You'll never sleep because you'll want to watch episode after episode and go through. Dan Stillerman, thank you for looking after us tonight. Thank you for all your technical expertise. And we're going to play out tonight with just a replay of the tribute that we put together of our community together with Nelson Mandela. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again on Thursday evening. Good night, Dan. Good night, Benji, Rory, Albie, Luanda. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
I have fought against white domination. And I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an idea for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
שיר למעלות אשא עיניי אל ההרים מאין יבוא עזרי מעימה השם עושה שמיים וארץ אל יתן למות רגליך אל ינום שומרך הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל השם שומרך השם צילך על יד ימינך יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה השם ישמורך מכל רע ישמור את נפשך השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם מעתה ועד עולם שיר למעלות אשא עיניי אל ההרים מאין יבוא עזרי מעימה השם עושה שמיים וארץ אל יתן למות רגליך אל ינום שומרך הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל השם שומרך השם צילך על יד ימינך.
So we're going to leave the chat on just for another minute or two so people can tell us, please tell us in the chat if you enjoyed tonight, if you found tonight inspiring, give us some feedback. We'd love to hear what you thought of this evening, whether you enjoyed it, whether there were questions that were unanswered, whether there were things that you still wanted to hear. Dan, what did you think of tonight?
Wow, Howie, it was uplifting. It was so inspiring. It was so genuine. It was optimistic. It was, I think, much needed. I'm reading the last comment that came in here from Neeland. And, you know, there've been unbelievable comments coming through in the chat. And I think I echo all of them. And I think it was heartfelt. It was warm. It was really wonderful. And I'm glad that I got the chance and the privilege to listen to and hear these stories.
So Dan, you don't come out of a legal background like me. You haven't spent time, I presume, at the Constitutional Court. Have you been to the court?
I've been to Constitution Hill, but it was years ago, and I've now got a renewed desire to head back there. And I think the Constitution Hill Trust, it sounds fascinating, and it sounds like I think all of us should become familiar with our history and should definitely pay a visit. I'll be watching for the launch of their website soon, hopefully.
Benji, have you been to the court?
Yeah, I have, and I just actually found two things so inspiring. Firstly, just the genuineness of deep optimism is completely confronting what the issues are. It's not being naive to the issues, but what they brought to the fore was with understanding our brilliant history and our deep history, there's this ability to get through these problems. I found that, and then just to see Lwando, the quality of person who is part of the next generation and the kind of changes that she's driving. I was incredibly moved. I know Rory well, as you know. I've seen him, and I know how moved he has been in the country, and how committed he has been. So I just felt, if we can do anything for Nelson Mandela, it's to believe in our future, like he never gave up on us, and he never gave up for a second. And I think that there's no more profound way to remember him, Howie. I don't know what you think.
Can I tell you the thing that I love most about the Constitutional Court? And it's in the design, and Albie was responsible for the design of the court. And the one thing is, if you walk in, the walls of the court are face brick, taken from the prisons around where the human rights violations took place, and they've repurposed those exact same bricks, and they built them into the wall of the court, that there should always be a reminder of where we came from. And that should really be the underlying principle of where we're going to in terms of our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. And that's number one. And the second thing that I love so much is the fact that there's a little glass window in the court. I don't know if you've noticed it. And it's at foot level, that you should see the shoes of the people walking past you, because this is a people's court. And those are the amazing lessons that I think come from interesting things like design and the way we actually think about our past and our future, and how our past can actually inspire us to be better. And it is that really I find so remarkable. Yeah.
Howie, where were you when you heard Steve Biko had been assassinated?
Not Steve Biko, Chris Hani.
Chris Hani.
So I was in fact at my parents' home. I remember it quite clearly. It was one of those days where you thought the world was going to end, because you didn't know what to expect. I didn't realize that shortly thereafter I would be running the country's elections. I joined the IEC not that long afterwards, and there were hairy moments there as well, where my offices would be evacuated and bombs were going off in the middle of Johannesburg, and people were trying to smash into our building and kill us. And those are amazing stories, and maybe one day, if we're still on lockdown in April next year, we'll tell stories of the first democratic elections and the amazing experiences that all of us had. But, I think we have to tonight as well pay tribute to literally the hundreds of members of our own community. Albie is merely one example. But if you think about it, there were so many South African Jews that went into exile. There were so many South African Jews who paid enormous prices. If in the Jewish Report this week, and I'm sure you've picked up your copy of the Jewish Report, we've gone to the next generation. We've gone to Arthur Goldreich's kids and asked them to tell us stories. We in fact even we didn't unfortunately get from Joe Slovo and Ruth First's kids their story. But when you think about so many of the icons of the struggle were in fact Jewish, and their kids paid a remarkable price, because many of them grew up without parents at home. Their parents were in jail and were in detention. And there's so many people, the Rivonia trial was Goldberg and Goldreich and Waltby and Bernstein. These were the true icons of South Africa. And it's important that we as a community don't lose sight of what we as a community have contributed to a free and democratic South Africa.
Yeah. I made the Freudian slip about Steve Biko, but the part of what I was saying there, Steve Biko was the start of the line of these terrible moments in our, well, not the start, but part of a line of terrible moments in our history. And Chris Harney, and as we go on, and if you see how they remain committed to the struggle and to the vision of South Africa, I just found that incredibly inspiring. And I thought that it was very, very moving how they said that who paid the biggest price was Nelson Mandela's children. And in the same way, our struggle icons, who I'm sure you know a lot of them, their children really paid a tremendous price. And I think that it's just such an inspiring story and such an inspiring legacy to Madiba. What the country looks like.
We lost Zinzi Mandela this week, and I see Judy Cowan's just messaged me from London. But I have memories while Judy was busy lecturing at Wits, lecturing law at Wits. She and I went to go take her lecturing notes to Zinzi because she couldn't actually attend the lectures. And we went to, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Mill Park Hotel. And we went to go deliver Judy's lecture notes. And here was a woman, and there was a crying baby living in a hotel room with a boyfriend and with bodyguards all on top of each other, just paying an ultimate price, still in the 1980s. Not so long ago.
It's been quite this week is also, I think, a year since another one of our struggle icons in a different form, Johnny Clegg, died. I think it's a year this.
It's a year this week. It's your time.
This week, and you know he that beautiful scene of him and Mandela singing together is just something that I know I watch time to time, and I just love it actually.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. It's been a remarkable evening. I hope everyone has enjoyed it. It's incredible to see that we still have about 600 or 700 people who've stayed with us nearly 2.5 hours into the night. But an amazing evening. Dan, thank you for everything. We'll see you all on Thursday night when we'll speak to Aladaka.
Thanks, Howie, and well done to you and Benji for putting this together. And thanks to Elby and to Luando and to Rory as well. Yeah, from my side backstage, it was an absolute privilege. So thank you. Good night. We'll see you Thursday.
Fantastic. Cheers, guys.